and welcome to Excel Tips. My name is Neale Blackwood, CPA, and in this episode we're going to look at some formula and function tips to help you create your formulas and functions. Now, a couple of common errors when you're creating formulas and especially functions is if we go back into XLOOKUP. So one of the problems is the commas. So if you miss out a comma, then that can cause a problem. And then the other thing is quotation marks. So in this case, if I can't find it, I could display a blank. So to display a blank, you just put two quotation marks together. Anytime you're using text, you need two quotation marks around the text. So for example, I could say none as if I return it. So if I go here and delete that, this one gives me an error, the VLOOKUP, whereas the XLOOKUP just puts the word none. Now, when you're building this, if you forget the quotation mark, when you hit enter, Excel's going to say, oh, we found something wrong. We have corrected it. We found a typo in your formula, and it will correct it most times, but if you're using multiple text, it might not correct it correctly. So just a heads up, always check this when it pops up with it. You can say no, and then okay, and then go back and put the quotation mark in exactly where you want it. So quotation marks and the commas and also brackets. When you're using multiple functions together, sometimes you can forget to put a bracket in and that will cause problems. So they tend to be the common errors: a comma, a quotation mark, and a bracket. There's also colors on the sheet. Let's have an example here. So I've got a sum function. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is sum functions can have commas in them, and so you can separate the ranges that you want to add up. So in this case, I want to add up the actuals for gadgets and the actuals for widgets. So I want to do an overall total there. So you can basically have as many ranges between these sum brackets as you want, and you just separate them by commas. Now you'll notice that it's giving me different colors on there as well. Now the colors do two things. The first thing is they're giving you a visual display of what's being added up by the sum function in this case, but they also allow you to change them. So let's say I wanted to add up the budget columns instead of the actuals columns. So I can point to the border and it goes darker or bolder if you like, and then I can drag it across with the mouse, and then I can point to this border and drag it across, and it has updated the formulas for me. It does two things. It shows you where the formula is, but it also allows you to edit the formula by dragging the color. In terms of a range, for example, you could drag this up as well, and that adjusts the formula. Now, I wouldn't do it in this case because I want to add them all up, but you can edit the formula with the mouse. So you don't even need to type anything. You can just edit it with the mouse by moving that color around. So entering cell references. So I've put a little table in the article. There's three ways to enter cell references. You can type them in. So you can type in equals A1. That's okay. The problem is if you're trying to do for example, a range reference, which requires you to use the colon and the beginning cell and the ending cell, it's a bit prone to error. So you might want to avoid it for ranges. If you know the cells that you want to refer to, feel free to type them in, but sometimes you might not know them. You might need to find them. And so you need to navigate away from where you're building your formulas. In general, I rarely will type in a cell reference. I tend to use either the arrow keys. So let's go back to this example. So let's say I wanted to find the variance between the actuals and the budget. So this is sales example. So I'm going to go equals. I'll press my left arrow key twice to select the actuals, press the minus, and then press the left actual key once to select the budget. And that's the easy way to do it. You can type it. So I could go, I can use my plus sign, plus B3 minus C3. It's in lowercase, that's okay. Excel will capitalize it for you. So that's another way to do it. You can use the mouse. So you can click on there and then minus, and use the mouse as well. So they're the three ways. If you're building a formula close to where your values are, I would tend to use the keyboard. So the left arrow key, and again the left arrow key. So I would tend to do that there. If you're creating a range, for example, I'm going to, let's say I want to go down here and do that sum. I would use the mouse to select the range. There is another technique. So let's say we want to do that again, and let's add up this range. What you can do, if you've got a very long range that doesn't have any blanks in it, what you can do is Control Shift down, and that will select a long range. You can also go across if you want using Control Shift and the right arrow, but Control Shift down is a pretty common keyboard shortcut to select a long range that's vertical. You don't need to put the last bracket in either. If you've given a function everything it needs, I'll do that again. So equals sum, select the range. I'm just going to hit enter, and that will put the bracket in there. If you've missed something out, then Excel will bring up that warning message that we saw earlier. So just a heads up there. But you can leave out that last bracket, and Excel will help you. Now, if you're not familiar with a function, what you can use is the function wizard here. So you can search, so you can do sort of a Google search of functions. Let's say we want to look at average. There's an average, so we can double click on it. This will give you a brief description of the function that you want to work with, and you can enter. Now, the average is like the sum function. You can actually have multiple ranges in there. When you're building it, so let's say we want to use that and then use that. It will, when you give it one argument, it might give you another argument to fill if you want to use it. You don't have to, but that's sort of showing you with the average. If we do, I think in the notes, I use the SUMIFS function. So once you type it in here, you can click the FX, and that will open up the function arguments. Notice that there's only 2 entries here, but SUMIFS needs 3. So once you enter the first one, so let's say we want to add that range up, and then when I click in the next box, it then gives me my criteria. So you can then build it, and so that might be the criteria range, and then you might want to use another cell to do the SUMIFS. SUMIFS is a conditional sum that will add up if you meet a certain condition. Extra boxes may appear once you've made an entry. The first screen that you see may not be everything you need to enter, but as you enter them, they will expand. It does give you a brief description of each part of the function as well when you click on it, so you can read those as well. So that little function, that little FX, can help you create your functions. If you're new to a function and you want to learn about it, then that's a good way to do that. You can audit your functions. So if you click on the Formulas tab, so Formulas is where you can find out lots of information on your functions. There is a formula auditing section, so you can trace precedents, dependents, and show formulas. You can also do some error checking and evaluate. So the evaluate formula can help you step through your functions, especially if you've got multiple functions. That's something that can help you sort of understand your functions if you're sort of taking over a spreadsheet from someone else. If you want to find out what part of a formula equals, you can do this. So let's go back here. So what you can do is, if you want to find out what something returns, so let's say we want to find out what this XLOOKUP returns, if you highlight it, it will show you above it. Now, in the old days, you had to hit the F9 key, so I'll do that. And that would show it to you, but that replaces it in the formula. So you had to hit escape when you're using F9. So if you're in an older version of Excel, pressing F9 will calculate that part of the formula and show you the result as it is here. Now you do need to hit escape, otherwise that stays in the formula, which is not what you want. So I'm going to hit escape, do it again, and this time you'll see again it does put a little what's called a tooltip. Sometimes it disappears, I'm not sure why. There it is. So that tooltip is replacing the F9 basically. So you can select part of a formula. As long as it's independently calculatable, if that's a word, then it will show you the result. So again, you can find out what D2 has at the moment, ABC 999, and so you can highlight it. Now that's really useful if that cell is on another sheet, for example. So obviously we can see what the value is here, but if that cell is on another sheet, then that can show you what the value is. So all you need to do is highlight it, and it does show you that tooltip above what you've highlighted. Now, errors. So currently the VLOOKUP function is returning the NA error, and so we might want to insert the IFERROR function in front of it to handle the error. What we can do is we can define something else to display if an error is displayed, in this case 0. So when I highlight VLOOKUP here, you'll see it tells me at the moment it's returning NA. So IFERROR handles errors. There we go. So now that's showing a 0. The downside with IFERROR is it does handle all the errors, and so you can be masking some errors. So some errors are a little bit different to others in Excel. So that's the downside of using IFERROR, but it does ensure that you avoid having NAs and ref errors and things like that on your spreadsheet. But the downside is you are masking some of those errors. Like a ref error is one that you probably need to handle a little bit differently to an NA error, which is what the VLOOKUP is returning at the moment. So I'd like to finish off with something that is new to Excel. It's called dynamic arrays. I did do a series of 3 articles back in 2020 on them when they first came out. Now, it's a different way of calculating in Excel. The way to think about it is you typically work with a cell when you're doing a calculation, but dynamic arrays allow you to work with a range in the same way that you used to work with a cell. So for example, let's say I wanted to double this weight. So this is what you would normally do, or in the old days, this is what you do. So if I wanted to double that weight, I put a formula in there and then copy it down. Now you can do it differently. What you can do is, instead of referring to a cell, I can refer to a range and then go multiply by 2. Now, this does 2 things. It does all of the calculations at once, and it also spills down. So have a look. This blue outline is the formula spilling down. The formula is only in cell G2. It's not in any other cell. So each of these other cells, the formula is grayed out. So even if I put the correct value there, so 0.7, it gives you what's called a spill error. Now, just a heads up, the IFERROR function does not handle spill errors. So you do have to sort out your spill errors. If I delete that entry, the formula will spill down. So you can spill down, across, and you can also spill in 2 dimensions. So as I mentioned, it's a new way of calculating in Excel. The way to think about it is that in the old days, you could calculate based on cells, whereas now those same calculations in most cases can be done on a range. So you don't need to copy the formula down, if you like. In this case, the formula has spilled down to do the same calculation. There's a whole lot of new functions as well. They've been covered in those other articles. So dynamic arrays are an exciting part of Excel, and they will change the way you build your formulas going forward. There are a couple of symbols that are associated with dynamic arrays. If you want to refer to this spill range, what you can do is you can go equals G2 and then put the hash symbol on the end, and then that will match that spill range. So again, if I wanted to multiply that by 2, that will then double that range. Okay, so that's the spill range. So you might see this symbol equals at. This will be placed in some of your files that you open in the subscription version or the latest version of Excel. What this does is it forces Excel to work like it used to work. So for example, if I select that range, it's only going to show me the first cell. It's not going to spill down. Okay, so that's what it used to happen in Excel if you referred to a range. So To basically force Excel to work like it used to work, you put the @ symbol in front of the function, or in this case, the range. And Excel will put that in to older files that you open in the newer version of Excel. So that's the @ symbol. So there are two new symbols that you'll find in the latest versions of Excel. So the hash to refer to a spill range, and the @ symbol to make Excel work like it used to, if you like, in the current version. Okay, so I've covered a whole lot of tips and tricks associated with formulas and functions. I hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching.